Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Torin here with another Warhammer Total War Online commentary. In this particular battle, I will be playing the Empire, and I'm going to be facing off against the Vampire Counts. So definitely a Grim and Grave DLC-themed matchup, and it should be a lot of fun. So in my front line, I have a group of Halberdiers here, here, and here. So three groups. I feel like they're pretty good. A lot of these Vampire Count opponents I've been playing lately have been bringing a lot of Graveguard and also a mixture of Cryptors as well. So the Halberdiers, having both armor piercing and anti-large capabilities, as well as the charge defense, are pretty good in this matchup in my opinion. So I brought a group of them. And then in the secondary line, I brought a lot of great swords, and they're going to reap a great benefit from Volkmar. They really will get in there and pierce the armor of these sturdy Graveguard and Cryptors. They don't have the most armor, but regardless, the damage buffs will most certainly help against them as well. And then in the back here, I have the Silver Bullets. So I like to bring these guys. Occasionally Vampire Counts will bring ethereal units. They didn't bring that many, or if any, actually. No, I don't see any right now. So they did not bring any ethereal units, unfortunately for me. But at the end of the day, they still have pretty good combat stats, and if left unchecked, can do pretty good damage. So I have a single group of them, and they also do have the stock mechanic. So a lot of times your opponents won't account for them when they're initially assessing your army, and will move in accordance with you not having one. So a decent unit there. Then I also brought two Great Cannon, as well as the Hammer of the Witches, this Great Cannon. And again, it also does magic damage and has slightly higher stat than its brother here. So I had pretty good results with these two Great Cannons this game, and you guys will hopefully get to see that. And then in the back, I have two groups of Flagellants. So I just decided to bring them and try them out, and I figured they would be a decent unit to cover my flank, because if he does come around and get a decent engage here, the Flagellants at the end of the day, at least they won't break, and they will defend these cannons to the death. So I know they're probably not the best choice, but I wanted to have a little bit of fun and give them a try. So as far as leadership goes, like I mentioned before, I have Volkmar the Grim, who has all of his different buffs, and that is pretty much it for my army. So my opponent here has a front line of zombies, which are pretty decent fodder, though they're not shielded, so against missile attacks they will take quite a bit more damage than skeletons would and won't last quite as long. But I didn't bring much missile infantry that are even going to threaten these guys, so they're going to work out pretty well as fodder units. So in the secondary line, he has Graveguard, definitely a good choice. And then it looks like he has some Black Knights back here. So he is very, very cavalry heavy. And it looks like he's shooting a Gaze in the Gash, which I think I matrix him right here actually and dodge it. But he does have Vlad von Karstein, so he's going to have a very, very strong melee core. Vlad, just having him in the ranks with that leadership debuff as well as his other abilities, he is just a force to be reckoned with in melee combat. So that is his main core, Graveguard, zombies, that type of thing. And then he has two groups of Blood Knights, but you can see my Great Cannons are tearing into these guys. And he also has two groups of Cryptors, as well as a Necromancer, most likely for regeneration and some Gaze of Nagash fun business. So that's pretty much it. So without further ado, guys, let's get started. So immediately, I get my cannons online and just have them start targeting these Blood Knights, because these are very, very high value targets. And you can see, these cannon shots are actually doing pretty good damage to these guys. That was just one direct hit, and it already took him down maybe 10-15% of his HP. So it's clear that he has a massive mobility advantage. So I'm going to be forming kind of a Tetsudo here in a moment and just making a circular shield wall. You can see the Halberdiers are already repositioning to cover that flank there, and the cannons are still they should just be teeing off here. And if they do hit, you can see that did a pretty good amount of damage and took out a few models. And if I can generate that value and keep him, having to ride circles, not giving him good engagements, it's going to pay off. And you can see that the Witch Hammer is that what it's called? The Hammer of the Witches, the Witch Hammer, is doing great work for me and just doing tons of damage to these Blood Knights. So my opponent does use his Gaze of Nagash and gets a nice contact, but I retaliate by using the Nets of Amnentalk. So my plan was just to slow down Vlad and keep him away from my army for as long as possible while my cannons generated all this value, because he's not going to want to engage his main army with without these Graveguard and Vlad. That would definitely not be a good situation for him. So I just have these cannons circling around, and look, this group of Blood Knights is almost already completely gone. So I started to lurk near him with this Light Wizard. I was looking to maybe cast another Nets, but he was moving these guys very aggressively, and it was hard for me to get a decent engagement on them with the Nets of Amnentalk. So again, he's coming here with Uncle Vlad, but you can see he got tied up back there, and a lot of times when they do get locked up, you have to repath them. So people will often forget to do that, so it looks like that's what happened over there, but I'm sure he'll be joining the party shortly. So again, guys, look at these cannons. This group of Blood Knights is essentially out of the picture. The Silver Bullets also got a single volley on those Cryptors and did really good damage. So right now, I'm just getting a ton of value out of these units of these renowned regiments here. They are doing great work, and I also got a cannon fire on these Cryptors, and they're at half life. He's taken substantial losses on a lot of high value targets, but finally his zombies and his Cryptors, and not Cryptors, but the Graveguard are getting here, and they're going to get a pretty decent engagement. But again, I use my Nets and tie up Vlad. And that's just going to, allow me to generate more value here in the back line. And you can see these guys are just taking an absolute beating. So hopefully he will be able to get an invocation from the heck. And let's go ahead and take a look and see if he does have invocation. Looks like he does. So he does have that option available to him. So the zombies are engaging with halberdiers, which isn't a good matchup for me. I mean, but again, the zombies aren't going to do much damage. So it's a decent, fodder engagement. And, I can't complain. And I also sent some great swords over here to kind of get rid of these zombies. They'll cut through them very quickly. But my main priority was keeping these cannons safe because they were just absolutely decimating my opponent's troops. And things were going well. So looks like a few zombies tried to sneak around, and it's clear that he's going to try and get this group up and around here. But the flagellants are actually, they're decent against cryptors because cryptors don't have high armor, and flagellants actually have pretty high combat stats for how cheap they are, and they're going to get through these cryptors very fast. And you can see I'm kind of keeping Volkmar in the wings and just trying to wait to see where to send him. So these greatswords did engage with Black Knights, which isn't a bad engagement for me. Black Knights are armored, and the armor piercing of these greatswords is going to be pretty good. And unfortunately, the Blood Knights are coming in right now, and they're going to do pretty good shot combat, but their numbers are severely diminished. But my opponent wisely uses an invocation from Nehek here in a minute, if I'm not mistaken. There he goes. But I also netted him at the same time, which is good, because then the silver bullets, as you guys can see, they're over here, and they're going to take some nice pot shots and just tee off on those guys here in a moment. So looks like they might be slightly obstructed with something, but they should be shooting at those Blood Knights shortly. So right now, I'm able to pull my auxiliary troops, these halberdiers, and I also net down the Blood Knights, which just gets them tied up. And these flagellants, with the Grand Hammer of Sigmar, I did pull Volkmar over there to buff them. They cut through those cryptors, which was actually a very optimal engagement. Unfortunately for me, Uncle Vlad did get through the line, and I'm just going to stick my flagellants on him. They don't fear him. They're going to get in there and do pretty decent work against him, I suppose, but the important thing is they're not going to rout. So over here, I had the flagellants kind of secure this flank. This is a bad matchup for them. They're definitely going to not do well against these Graveguard, but at least they won't retreat. And most of the front line, it's going pretty well for me. My halberdiers are just slowly getting through this fodder, and things are not going that badly. So I definitely cannot complain. And the silver bullets, I'm just putting a big emphasis on protecting them. So my opponent was riding around with cavalry, so I reformed my greatsword ranks just to protect their rear. And these guys are doing great damage to these cryptors and are just taking them apart. And in the meantime, Volkmar, I realized that I was kind of faltering here in the front line, so I go ahead and send Volkmar in there. And my opponent uses the Master of Beguilement, but I retaliate by using Face Bastion to buff his damage. Or is that damage resistance? I always get them confused, but regardless, I use my buffs and my bombardment, and I use him to come and help these guys out as they got pushed by them. So right now, the silver bullets have been locked down, but I do use the Nets of Amnentalk. It's definitely been having a lot of success with that ability to lock down his cavalry and other units like that, to give my infantry and halberdiers an opportunity to engage on them. So over here in the back, the flagellants are doing pretty good, and they're starting to get through these cryptors. Unfortunately, my cannons are now offline, but you guys saw they generated plenty of value earlier. And this great cannon is actually still just shooting at his large units in the face, and it's doing a pretty good job, so I can't complain. Over here on this particular flank, the greatswords are engaged with Graveguard, which is exactly what you want. This is a great matchup. They have armor piercing, the Graveguard don't. Though Graveguard are quite sustainable and have pretty good combat stats, they do not have armor piercing, so the greatswords will win that matchup. Right here, I also have greatswords, but they are kind of tied up with fodder, and my opponent did get a rear charge. And he also has the Unit of Renown, their Sternsbin, and they've taken no damage. The regeneration on them is actually quite strong, and I think of the Vampire Count's Regiments of Renown, they're definitely one of the best choices. So right here, this has become a pretty pitched battle. Vlad von Karstein, again, you guys, he's been fighting for a while, and he has taken no damage. He is just so sturdy, has good regeneration effects, and is really making an impact in this battle. So I pulled Volkmar over here to help out, so it's definitely a nice thematic matchup here, and Volkmar's on his barded warhorse here, just swinging his mace down and just laying the beat down, and Vlad's doing the same to my guys, so it's definitely a very tight battle. The flagellants back here, they are getting the buffs with the Grand Hammer of Sigmar, so their combat stats are pretty good, and you can see these cryptors are finally starting to crumble. So the flagellants definitely did a good job at supporting my flanks, and they did not give up on these cannons. They fought there and defended them all day. Thankfully, those cryptors are now crumbling. So right here, this is kind of the main battle, and you can see Vlad is just so sturdy, and these Graveguard are, they're starting to go down, and now that Volkmar's in here, but my concern was that Vlad was going to turn on Volkmar, and he'll definitely lay the beat down on Volkmar. And over here, the Sternsmen are still in pretty good shape, and my greatswords here, they're shaken, and they're starting to take some losses. So I pulled some auxiliary greatswords to come help them out, as I was able to clear up the back line finally. And that was good at the same time because I was able to reform the silver bullets here, and now hopefully they have a bad angle now, but if I'm not mistaken, I pulled them up and around so they can get some better angles here. They're going to finish off that Cryptor. No, he already croaked. So I do have the cannons, so I'm going to be turning them shortly. But again, it's kind of a risky gambit to fire into your own troops at this close range. So generally, it'll just get obstructed. So Volkmar is was fighting Vlad, but you can see Vlad just got a few swings and also used the Master of Beguilement, which makes him a very good duelist in Lord Volkmar's melee attack. So right now I pull Volkmar in because this was a tight battle here, and I knew I needed to get through the Sternsmen. So I come in, I use my bombardment ability, and I'm just using him to buff these troops and really turn the tide of the battle because I wasn't making much progress over here at all. And I also pulled the Light Wizard away. I figured that I should just tie up Vlad. I don't want to, put my valuable units on him. I should just kill, all of his supporting troops and then let him disintegrate through leadership and different things like that. So my opponent definitely wisens up and he brings in Vlad over here. And this is definitely not good news for the Greatswords here. As soon as Vlad turns on the heat, you can see a whole row of them go flying with his thrust of his sword there. So thankfully, I do have the various buffs from Volkmar, which is slowly really making a difference here. And you can see the Sternsmen are now going down. So my opponent does use Van Hel's Dance Macabre to give them speed and melee attack. Personally, I'm not a big fan of that ability, but the melee attack is, still decent. So it's not bad at all. So I do turn the cannon, and I think I actually just was going to start shooting at Vlad, but unfortunately I was kind of obstructed and didn't really have any good targets with it. So I do pull the Flagellants and the Silver Bullets, and I pull them up and around. I was on this Necromancer, and I don't know why I didn't finish him off. I must have gotten distracted and was just hyper-focused on dealing with Vlad, but you can see Volkmar is definitely not wanting to fight him. There's the cannon fire. It looks like it hit Volkmar more than it did Vlad, actually. So I actually have to run. He is just such a powerful duelist, and for an infantry unit, he actually has 40 run speed, which is really fast. Granted, my cavalry has about 60 or so, but he can still chase down most infantry and, can close the distance quite quickly in battles. So here, I do send the Silver Bullets. Did I send them or no? It looks like the Necromancer actually just chased them down, which was unfortunate. So Volkmar picks up on this threat and doesn't want to let his boys go down without a fight. So I pull him over here, and this is going to be a good situation for him, smiting some evil. And he just rides up and lays the beat down on that Necromancer. Damn, that guy got it bad. That was pretty cool. So now Volkmar is coming back to the main line. And it's a tight battle. My opponent uses Master of Beguilement, which is nice. It actually seems to come up fairly often. But at that point, the army losses. Uncle Vlad had met the end of his days. And you can see the Flagellants here celebrating. Their cult has definitely won the day. And still a healthy group of Greatswords here. So definitely a really good battle. It was a lot of fun. And, it really came down to the value I got out of these cannons. Though they only got 26 kills, most of them were on Blood Knights, which is huge. Because those are, what are they, 1,700? And also, it kind of backfired on my opponent because usually you bring Blood Knights to win the cavalry battle. So almost all Empire players will bring Demogryph Knights or some sort of an equivalent. And winning that battle against the Demogryph Knights just opens up the floodgates because then they don't have the same resources invested into their infantry and you can kind of run rampant in their backline. But since I didn't have that, was able to kind of form a turtle formation and just really take advantage of my range superiority. And even though the Silver Bullets only had 7 kills, you saw they did pretty good damage to those Cryptors. But Volkmar did quite well, and the Net's Famine Talk were also good for locking down Uncle Vlad in the beginning. And, of course, the Greatswords are just the MVP of that battle, so very strong. My opponents, the Sternsmen, I really like these guys. I think they're awesome. I hadn't really picked up on how good they were until yesterday when I was playing against them. And just seeing every game I see them, they're just always one of the last units alive and seem to generate some good results. So really good game to my opponent, Night Owl. I look forward to seeing you again on Ladder. And I just want to thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate the support and more content coming soon. Take care, guys.